What if your enemy promised the impossible? Would you believe them or laugh in their face? In the bitter cold of December 1944, amidst the snow-laden forests of the Ardennes, a bold declaration echoed across the Allied High Command. General George S. Patton, a man known for his aggressive style and unshakable confidence, made a promise that seemed to defy all logic. We can reach Bastogne in 48 hours. To many, it sounded like bravado. To the German High Command, it was amusing. On December 17th, Patton had begun what would become one of the most audacious troop movements of the Second World War. His plan: pivot the entire Third Army northward through ice-covered roads, deep forests, and chaos to relieve the surrounded town of Bastogne, where the 101st Airborne was being suffocated under German siege. But when word of Patton's intention reached the ears of German generals, the response was far from concern. "American boasting," scoffed one senior officer. "That would take weeks, not days." In their eyes, the Americans were slow, indulgent, and logistically incapable of such a maneuver. The German winter offensive, known to history as the Battle of the Bulge, had been crafted as a surprise counterstrike meant to split Allied lines and push all the way to Antwerp. And so far, it was working. Bastogne, a strategic crossroads, was under complete siege. Snowstorms blanketed the skies, grounding Allied aircraft. Supplies were dwindling. Morale was hanging by a thread. For a moment, the war looked like it might turn. The Germans believed the harsh winter and their lightning assault had bought them time, at least a week, maybe two, before the Americans could respond. They didn't know Patton. They didn't understand the machine of war that was roaring to life behind the front lines. They had no idea what was coming. In the silence of the snow, German officers laughed at the mere thought of Patton's 48-hour promise. But only days later, that laughter would be buried beneath the thunder of engines and the march of American boots. For all their military brilliance, the German High Command remained anchored to a vision of war forged in the trenches of World War I, a war of speed, cunning, and tactical precision. Their doctrine prized maneuver, not machines. Blitzkrieg had made them legends, and in their eyes, no industrial giant could outthink German steel and strategy. When American forces landed in Normandy and pushed eastward, German generals believed they were facing a clumsy, inexperienced army, an army of civilians in uniform, an army fueled by chewing gum, jazz, and Hollywood delusions. To them, American soldiers were products of a soft, consumerist society, unlikely to endure the grind of real war. American officers were seen as bureaucrats, not battlefield minds. And American industry? Overhyped, disorganized, inefficient. These assumptions weren't just whispered in mess halls, they were embedded in official intelligence briefings. German reports consistently downplayed American logistical capacity. They believed the U.S. couldn't rapidly redeploy troops over long distances. They believed supply chains would snap in winter conditions. They believed wrong. Fueling this misconception was a steady stream of Nazi propaganda. German civilians and officers alike were fed a narrative of American weakness, a hollow force propped up by factories, not forged in fire. It was a comforting lie, and a dangerous one. Even Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, though privately skeptical of the Ardennes offensive, accepted that American response times would be sluggish. Major Ernst Hoffmann, another key figure, openly laughed at Patton's 48-hour claim, calling it impossible for any modern army. Lieutenant Colonel von Stahlenberg wrote in his journal, "They may have the numbers, but not the will. This war will end with our winter victory." So confident were German troops in the Ardennes that some began celebrating prematurely. Bonfires lit up behind the lines. Laughter echoed through the pines. One officer famously said, This winter, we will drive the Americans back to the sea. The snow was still falling. The tanks were still advancing, but the seeds of misjudgment had already been sown, and they would soon bloom into disaster. The snow didn't stop them. The cold didn't slow them. And in less than 48 hours, General Patton's promise, once mocked, became unstoppable reality. Between December 19 and 21, 1944, while the Ardennes froze under snowstorms and German soldiers toasted their presumed victory, something unprecedented happened. General George S. Patton shifted 3 entire divisions, over 100,000 men, through blizzard-covered roads, icy rivers, and narrow mountain passes. It was one of the fastest and most complex military maneuvers of the Second World War. The speed stunned even American officers. The precision made it look rehearsed. The Germans? They didn't believe it was possible, until it was too late. Behind this miracle was more than Patton's daring leadership. It was the full force of American industry, unleashed. In Michigan, the Ford River Rouge plant and Willow Run assembly line were churning out war machines with machine-like consistency. A B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes, a Sherman tank every 30 minutes, trucks, jeeps, artillery, ammunition, all rolling off lines faster than entire Axis nations could imagine. To the Germans, it was unfathomable. American soldiers seemed to have everything, and more. They drove specialized snow-clearing vehicles. They wore cold weather gear tailored for Arctic conditions. Each squad had its own radio, ensuring instant communication from the front line to air support. Behind the scenes, a logistics network moved with frightening efficiency, calculating supply needs down to the chocolate bar. Captured German soldiers stared in disbelief at the behavior of American troops. They watched as Americans threw away half-used rations, discarded boots with a minor tear, and replaced functioning equipment, simply because they could. One Wehrmacht officer, stunned by the sheer abundance, wrote, "They don't fight like us. They fight like factories made men. They are not starving, they are expanding." Another remarked, "They came out of the snow like they stepped out of another world." What the Germans had dismissed as boasting was, in truth, the emergence of a new kind of warfare, one powered not just by bravery or tactics.
It didn't happen all at once.
It came in waves of snow, of steel, of silence, and then collapse. In just a matter of weeks following Patton's breakthrough, the German offensive, once hailed as a bold winter strike, had turned into a catastrophic defeat. By mid-January 1945, the numbers were staggering. Over 100,000 German soldiers killed, wounded, or captured in the Ardennes. Entire units were wiped out. Panzer divisions left smoldering in icy valleys. Assault guns abandoned. Tanks frozen in place. The Wehrmacht's last major reserves spent, broken, lost. Worse than the human toll was the realization that these losses could not be replaced. Germany's war machine was running on fumes. Factories back home had been bombed to rubble. Fuel was scarce. Aircraft production was slowing to a crawl. Yet above it all, American bombers continued to roar, wave after wave, ripping through the skies, even in impossible weather. Thunderbolts and Mustangs strafed convoys. B-17s blanketed supply lines with destruction. The Luftwaffe, once feared, was nowhere to be seen. Its pilots were dead, its planes grounded, its legacy fading into smoke. On the ground, German soldiers fought in desperation and in disbelief. Wearing summer uniforms in sub-zero blizzards, many were starving, frostbitten, or sick. They scrounged for food, burned furniture to stay warm, and dug trenches in frozen mud. Their supplies dwindled while their enemies advanced with warm coats, hot meals, and fresh equipment. The psychological toll was just as devastating. Once proud soldiers began to whisper what no one dared say aloud. This war is lost. Journal entries from captured officers began to reflect this shift. One wrote, "We are not fighting an army. We are fighting their entire industry, and we are alone." Another observed, "The tanks never stop. The skies never clear. The roads are never empty. Every hour, they bring more." The myth of German superiority, crafted by propaganda, believed by generals, was cracking. And what seeped through those cracks. For many German soldiers, defeat didn't come on the battlefield. It came later, in silence, in comfort, in the warmth of an unexpected bed. And it shattered everything they thought they knew. By early 1945, tens of thousands of German prisoners of war were shipped across the Atlantic to internment camps in the United States. Among them were officers, engineers, medics, and die-hard believers of the Nazi regime. They expected punishment. They expected hardship. What they got instead was electricity, running water, and meals that felt like luxury. At Camp Cook in California and Camp Carson in Colorado, the captives were stunned to find hot showers, clean beds, working lights, medical facilities stocked with modern equipment, and food, so much food, served on schedule 3 times a day, meat, eggs, fresh fruit, things their families back home hadn't seen in years, things even many German officers hadn't eaten since before the war began. One POW wrote in a censored letter home, "We are treated better here than our wounded were at the front. There is more bread in one day than my mother receives in a week." For medical professionals among the prisoners, the shock was even deeper. Dr. Ernst Weber, a captured German army surgeon, observed the mobile surgical units of the US Army. He wrote, "They have machines we've only seen in journals. Their wounded are evacuated in hours. Ours waited days, often to die." And slowly, cracks began to form, not in bones or barracks, but in ideology. Captain Heinz Schultz, once a vocal Nazi loyalist, found himself sitting under a functioning electric heater, reading American newspapers, and eating stew with chunks of beef. In a secret journal he managed to keep, he wrote, "If they could build all this while fighting a 2-front war, what could they have built in peace?"
The arduous task of rebuilding.
The illusion of German superiority, of destiny, of chosen greatness, crumbled. What replaced it was a humbling realization. They had been lied to. Some broke down in shame. Others grew angry, not at the Americans, but at the regime that sent them to die for a fantasy. One young officer, newly captured, was seen. The war ended. The guns fell silent. The prisoners went home. But the truth, that stayed with them. For thousands of German officers and soldiers held in American POW camps, captivity became an education. They had seen with their own eyes what American industry could do, how it could build faster, adapt smarter, and mobilize millions across oceans. And when they returned to their broken homeland, cities flattened, economies gutted, trust in leadership shattered, they brought something back that Germany desperately needed: a new way of thinking. Many former POWs, once soldiers of the Reich, became architects of West Germany's rebirth. They helped lay the foundations of the Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle that turned a ruined nation into an industrial powerhouse. They embraced mass production, standardization, logistical precision, tools they had witnessed in awe while watching American convoys roll endlessly through snow-covered France. It wasn't surrender. It was transformation. The Battle of the Bulge, what some had hoped would be Hitler's last great blow, became something far more profound, a lesson etched in ice and steel. Never underestimate your enemy. Never fight tomorrow's war with yesterday's mind. The Ardennes was not just a battlefield. It was a mirror, revealing the cost of arrogance, the power of production, and the future that could be built from shattered ideologies. And today, the question lingers. Who, in our time, is making the same mistake Germany made in 1944? Who is laughing at the wrong enemy? Because history doesn't repeat itself exactly,
laughs at the wrong
but
enemy.
it does echo. And if you listen closely, somewhere beneath the snow,
But is that
beneath the engines
really
and
the
the
whole
silence,
story?
you might still hear the question. But is that really the whole story?